meeting started at 7:02 p.m. Thank you everybody for coming along to this last, as we know it, Climate Change Subcommittee meeting. I'll begin with the usual introduction, but as we don't have any members of the public here tonight, so it will be a bit more rapid. So thank you to all councillors and officers who are joining us for today's meeting. Councillors and officers are reminded of their commitment to the Civility and Respect Pledge and to be mindful of this during tonight's meeting. Please be aware that the council is video recording this meeting and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I would just like to highlight some key points of the meeting format. Please can I ask everybody to have their phones turned off or set to silent. We all know where the fire exits are, but just as a reminder, it's down the stairs or the external fire escape. Do not use the lift if there is a fire, and the assembly point is outside the Royal Mail Parcel Office on West Street. We won't have any public participation, so to all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order and I will then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone present is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. And thank you for listening. On behalf of the council, I would like to thank everyone for attending this town council meeting. Welcome. Thank you. Right, so we've got three substantive items and some usual items to begin with. So I'll just go to number one, apologies for absence. I'm aware that Councillor Rod Buchanan has personal commitments, but everybody else is here, I believe, so thank you all for coming. Number two, disclosure of interests. Does anybody have any disclosures they would like to make tonight to anything relevant to the agenda? No? Okay, thank you very much. Right, we have no members of the public in attendance tonight, so we'll skip 3 and go straight on to agenda item 4, which is our climate change update report. So thank you very much to Steve for preparing this, and so this report brings together the work of the Climate Change Subcommittee, and it's been a bit of a journey for Seaford Town Council. Over the years, and certainly before I was a councillor, I know Councillor Meek here really drove, I think, the climate emergency matters at the beginning, so certainly my personal thanks to you. Steve, would you like to talk us through this report a little bit?
I can do. I mean, obviously this is a journey of the Climate Change Subcommittee from its inception through till now. I believe it was formed in May 2022, so it's been going for a little less than 3 years. Because of the changes to the committee structure which are going to take place from May, this committee won't exist in this current subcommittee won't exist in the current form, and so we thought it would be appropriate to provide a paper detailing some of the achievements and some of the areas that this committee has discussed and considered during its time, and so yeah, it's a bit of a this is your life of the subcommittee.
Thank you very much.
So if there's any questions, then
yeah.
I'll welcome those.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Honeyman.
If I'd like to say, unless I've missed it, the January 24, was it January 24 where some councils did the carbon literacy training?
Oh yes, that's true.
But that's not written in here, is it?
No, it's not. That's a really good point.
I noticed no staff did it at all, so I was wondering if maybe the staff, did you complete?
Sharon?
Are you qualified?
I didn't. Perhaps there was another section I needed to go to because I had to jump out at lunchtime, but
Yeah,
I did attend for the morning session.
You probably have to spend the same again to actually do a mini project to actually get the actual certificate to make it sort of cement what the learning you did on the. So I don't know if that's a way forward to get other staff more interested. That could be a way forward for the basic literacy. I don't know what the chair thinks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hanneman. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I believe that the previous chair and vice chair of the Climate Change Subcommittee did a different type of climate emergency carbon literacy training, and then several of us did a one-day course here at the council. Yes, I think it was.
Was it January 24 and 23? It wasn't 2 years, surely.
I think it probably was January 2024. I know that that is still going and it's been updated and there are kind of more options available now. So perhaps that's something with the new GOSCA committee and the councillors and any officer staff on that we can look at sort of off the bat, refreshing ourselves, those who've been on it before and those who haven't, introducing. So perhaps we can add that into our summary when it goes to the GOSCA committee. But thank you very much for that point, that's great. Anybody else like to make any comments or have any queries? Councillor Mink?
Not to comment on that, but to thank the interim town clerk for it, but also to welcome Councillor Dubas to our little gathering here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Dubas, who's now officially on the committee for tonight. Yes, thank you very much. That's great. Okay, well, it's certainly not been plain sailing for the Climate Change Subcommittee. A lot of things have happened. I think there's been quite a lot of influence with the limited resources that we've had. I know it's been a bit of a journey even before I came in and before that point, and I'm really pleased that this will go forward into the new Golf and Open Spaces and Climate Action Committee. So I think it's really helpful to have this kind of summary report. Councillor Matthews?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, on reflection, that it's, we've had quite a few kind of guests come in and speak to us, and actually that's been really valuable. I found it really interesting. So if that can continue in the new setup of climate action, then that would be great.
Thank you, that's a really, really great point. Yes, we've had a couple of sort of different evenings where we've had various local organisations come in, and then of course we had Natural England and Sussex Wildlife Trust when we were considering the LNR. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have that, and hopefully we can keep those relationships and bring more people in as we go forward. If I may, yes, Councillor Taylor.
I actually echo what you said, Councillor Matthews. I think I'm wondering whether we do keep enough of a log of those kinds of organisations. They sometimes emerge out of the visitors, the audience, and sometimes they've been invited in officially. So, but each time it's about green issues in the Seaford, which anyway, just to note, let's try and pick that up as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's something we can build on, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, Sharon, whether you've got anything to say to that, but I certainly know that there are some Seaford Action for Nature, for example. There are some umbrella organisations who do bring a lot of the groups together, but we're fortunate to have new groups springing up, and through other projects as well. I think we try and bring them together. So yes, I think certainly an intention to do that there. Do you want to add anything?
I mean, yeah, it's given some clarity, hasn't it? Because they do come in and work with officers, so it is nice to have that validation of the information that they're sharing and the knowledge to be shared for you guys to be able to make a better decision about the direction of travel.
Absolutely. That's great. Councillor Mick.
Could I just, thank you, Chair, could I just add actually that it's really good that this, which is really kind of an advisory subcommittee, is now going to be upgraded to a full committee status in combination with the other aspects of that, and hopefully we can go forward to consider the whole of Seaford Head Estate in its entirety, which I think is a very good overarching thing to be able to do. And just to also point out that since the Labour government has just recently withdrawn its climate and nature bill, it's much more important that we can try and, at the grassroots level, press these things forward, notwithstanding, despite the lack of leadership there, and the fact of the downgrading of all the environmental initiatives that they were going to bring in their, when they were campaigning, and all that's gone out the window. So we've kind of got to try and do it ourselves. And I think whilst we still have Lewis District Council for the foreseeable next couple of years, I think it would be really good to try and tap into as much as they can give us, because they will want to leave a legacy, particularly as they really did make a very good climate action strategy and sustainability strategy. And I think if we can tap into that and get them to give as much as they can, whether financially or in the way of initiatives and assistance, I think that would be really good, because I think they will want to help us and leave that legacy before it becomes a unitary authority.
Yeah, thank you for that point. That's a fantastic point, and I think I will ask you to hold that, and we can bring that up in our next agenda item so that it can be captured and taken forward, if that's okay. I'm going to indulge myself, and actually I'd like to propose an amendment when we get to the recommendations. I'll come to you, Councillor Hanlon, again, if that's okay. On number 2 is to pass a motion of thanks to all current and former members of the Climate Change Subcommittee for their role in driving and supporting the work of the subcommittee. And I'd also like to add an officer support that we've had, because I know certainly we're lucky to have Steve here, fortunate to have Steve here with us now, and Sharon's been here since I've been in post and has supported us through some difficult times, but we've still tried to keep everything going as best we can. So I would like to capture that in there, and I hope that councillors will support me in that.
I second that.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Honeyman.
Just regarding the Gloucester situation, so if a decision comes out of Gloucester and it affects the other committees, is there a way of implementing it from that committee?
I think that's probably best placed in the first Gloucester meeting, would you say, Town Clerk? But also to say...
Can that be noted, because at the moment it's not, is it? So,
yeah, also to say that I think things would go through in the usual way, and they could be routed as appropriate. So, for example, it could go then to full council, it could be taken if it was something that was council-wide, or it might go to the general purposes area of F&GP, if it's something that's very pertinent to one of the areas of responsibility of the New Assets and Facilities Committee, for example, it might go there, but we would still sort of originate some of the things that we've got in the plans, which I won't speak too much on because they're the next item. I think, does that help? Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all I'd add is that the idea of the new committee structure is that each quarter there is a running of each committee who will debate and discuss in detail various proposals and policies and papers that are brought forward, and we'll make a recommendation to full council, and then at the end of that quarter there will be a full council that will receive all of the recommendations from the various committees and then pass them or not, as the case may be. That's the idea behind it, and it's supposed to be a quarterly cycle where each committee feeds into each full council. Part of the issue we've had until now is that there's been more full councils than there's been committees, and so quite often an idea came first to a full council and never went to the committee because the full council was next in line, whereas the idea is to try and organise it so that every committee debates, discusses, recommends, and then the full council approves it or not, as the case may be.
So I'm not sure if I totally like that approach, because otherwise you end up getting to a situation where the committee doesn't make any decision and everything has to go to full council. Now, is that incorrect or not? That's just something for a bigger debate, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood some of the structures for the wider picture. If you insist everything's got to go to full council.
Sorry, I'm not insisting anything. It's to do with what's delegated to the committee for each committee to approve and what needs to go to full council. You know, there's various things like disposal of land and others that have to go to full council.
Yeah, we know the statutory thing.
But areas that the committee feels are within their gift for them to decide and approve, then that will continue as it does currently.
Otherwise, for you, Chair, you might have done some monthly full councils. If you, you see what I mean?
I think the idea is to sort of organise things with timings a bit better and more regularity. Committees will still be able to do the sort of committee level stuff that they have done before, but it will just tie in better with the full council. Absolutely, So it's a great point. I think, if we do want to discuss it further, perhaps it's the next thing. But thank you for covering it, because climate change coming up to a committee level and not being just a subcommittee, I mean, I see that as a very positive thing. I hope everyone around the table here does, and hopefully we can make it work in the best way possible. So thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to now bring things together to the recommendations, and first of all, seeing as I do have amendments, I'm sorry to be pernickety about this one,
you need to vote
but we need to vote on the amendment. So without further ado, we have a proposer to include thanks for our officer support that the subcommittee has received. Councillor Meek has seconded. May I ask for all those in favour of that amendment, please? Excellent, that's everybody, thank you. Right, so in that case, I will, if everybody's okay with it, take the 2 recommendations together, including the amendment.
So can you read out the amendment?
Yes,
I don't know
yeah.
what the amendment was, I didn't quite get that.
Okay, so the first recommendation, number 1, to note the contents of the report stays, and the second one is to pass a motion of thanks to all current and former members of the Climate Change Subcommittee and officers for their support in driving, sorry I've said support twice now, I have to sort the grammar out, in driving and supporting the work of the subcommittee, so to include officers in those thanks, essentially. So, if that's clear to all councillors, excellent. So, can I ask for all those in favour to please raise their hands? Excellent, okay, that's everybody, so we've got no against and no abstentions, so that's passed. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, right, let's move on to agenda item number 5, which is climate action planning, so our recommendations of the Climate Change Subcommittee. So, when we were scoping out what we'd like to do in our last meeting, we thought it would be useful to update the climate change delivery plan that we had that ran to the end of 2023 now, if you remember. We then had the climate emergency policy come into play last summer, 2024, and from that we kind of took the policy points and started to think about how we can implement those. Some things were already happening, some things we knew were in the pipeline to happen, and there may be some new ideas which will come along at this meeting, and try and bring it all together in the form of this is sort of a precursor, if you like, to a climate action plan, which is a recognised format of document that actually has become mandatory to several organisations like schools and others. Lots of councils have already formulated climate action plans, they're working on them, particularly those who have declared climate emergencies previously. But to do something that's proportionate to us as a town council, to try and sort of bring everything together and a forward look so that we can then present this to the first meeting of the new GOSCA committee and say this is the climate action element, this is sort of where we've got to, let's take it forward from here. So thanks very much to Steve for preparing the report. I've done a bit of an intro there.
Right.
Would you like to add anything else?
I'm not sure there's much more to add other than I think at this stage we're looking at item 3.2, stage 1, which is the subcommittee will try and capture its thoughts and suggestions to be passed on to the GOSCA committee, and then we can pursue that further as we move forwards.
Yeah.
But more or less what you said anyway.
Okay, thanks. So, so we've got a couple of advisories here to discuss and comment upon the recommended actions and priorities that would underpin the delivery of our climate emergency policy, and then to review the actual process proposed for the creation of a climate action plan and make any comments on that. I'm actually wondering if we take 2 before 1, perhaps that might be slightly easier. Councillor, can I get a sort of nod or a shake of heads if that would help? Because if we go on to page 10, where we've got section 3, the climate action plan process, I think that's perhaps a little bit easier to start with. Does anybody have any reflections, comments or queries on the proposed process that's set out in 3.2 for the creation of a climate action plan? Councillor Matthews.
Other than, I think it's a good idea to have something firm, to have a plan that we can kind of work towards but also measure against. So I think that's good. So.
Thank you very much, thanks. Okay. Councillor Honeyman.
I think if you are going to have a plan, I think it's got to be reviewed like annually or ongoing basically. You can't, it's not one of those policies where you can just ignore for three or 4 years or something. It's got to be ongoing.
Yeah, so there's a question of first of all sort of measuring against our ambitions, and secondly about the review and how often and how we do that.
And also external influences.
Yeah, sure. I'll just remark that when we put the climate emergency policy in last summer, that came in with a condition of reviewing it after a year, and I think here under stage 2, it does say the GOSCA committee will review the climate emergency policies in its first meeting. So I think that's really timely, and I was glad to see that captured. I know the only thing I would sort of temper that with is saying, well, yes, it's been in place for a year, but as we know, as a council, we've had a lot of changes, things have been in flux, and we haven't quite had the resource to do perhaps what we might normally wish to do. So I think as long as we bear that in mind when we come to review it, but certainly that seems to be captured in there, so that will be fulfilled. Councillor Meek, you were going to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, so stage 3, a task and finish group will be identified. This will be a task and finish group from the GOSCA committee, presumably?
Yeah, I mean, that's the proposal. The proposal is that at stage 2, the GOSCA committee will review the emergency policy and then agree a process to move forward to create the CAP, and so the task and finish group will come from that.
From that, yeah.
That's the proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else have any queries or questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm looking for in this process a sense of when we have a review, because it's a new process with a new group, and we want to learn from it. We may find we've got things in it that don't quite work, and others that should perhaps be there that aren't. So I'm not clear, but is there a review built in? I didn't see that anywhere.
Sorry, yes, please.
I think part of the process of devising that COP will be to include a regular review of it going forwards, and
Right.
obviously councils will be able to determine if that's annually or how often you want that to be.
Right. Probably no. I mean, I don't want it to take over, but I think, given time, it might be good after. We're going to have 8 meetings, are we? After 4 or something like that.
And we're going to have the GOSCA committee will, as I understand it, meet 4 times a year. And here in this proposed process, so we've got the first GOSCA committee meeting is towards the end of May. And the second one will be maybe September, if not in August. So it will come back to that meeting, as I understand it.
That's right.
And I would imagine that because, as part of our discussions and deliberations to do with the new committee structure, I do remember asking about financial resource for climate action, because that's something which we've struggled with in the past, being a subcommittee and so on. So, I mean, personally, I would see that the climate action plan would probably be quite linked to the budget setting process, as it's underpinning our 6th strategic objective. So perhaps a review that's linked in with that might be sensible. But as the interim town clerk says, it's something really for when we start devising the CAP and we review the climate emergency policy that I think we'll need to think about altogether. So if that sufficiently answers that for everybody, I think we'll move on from that. But thank you very much for the query. Councillor Honeyman, just quickly.
Unless it's written here. So how are we measuring things? Targets, gases, emissions and so on?
I think at the moment we haven't done so much because with the climate action plan, and I know, from my work and so on, it's very difficult to do that unless you're sort of quite well resourced to do it. It's possible. I think in some ways, for example, when we were looking at the compostable toilets and the toilets policy and things, we were doing things relatively and saying, well, how many vehicle miles was it to attend to one option, how many vehicle miles was it to attend to another option, and what were the sort of chemicals involved and so on. You're able to sort of say, well, if we move to that type of setup, we reduce perhaps the mileage by 50%. I'm making figures up here, but you see what I mean, it was relative. We also, as you pointed out, the sort of difference between our internal actions that we can do within the council, and then we've got things which we'll partner with other councils and other groups with, and those will be accounted slightly differently. The sort of levels of uncertainty will change. So I think that's something which we should really consider as part of the climate action plan, and actually something which the climate literacy or carbon literacy training will really help us to get to grips with what we might be able to reasonably and proportionately do with some confidence, and what we might just need to rely on other research and things and say, well, we know if we do that, it is going to get us somewhere, but we may not be able to measure directly. So that's a really good point, and I would personally really like to see some measurables in there, but I do think we need to be realistic about what we can do. So hopefully that'll be part of the discussion when we come to formulate the climate action plan.
Can I quickly come back?
Yeah.
Obviously, your day job gets highly complex, as I know, and I know some of the officers at the more principal councils. Yeah, some of what they do, their missions and so on, again gets very complex, and what they measure, and and how they measure. And they've got resources. They've got do it themselves, or really consultants and labs and everything to process a lot of information, and then they can do that in the appropriate way, and the likes of Environment Agency or their crane goes below that can help them justify all that. Obviously, the very basics, the Carbon Literacy Project does talk about some of that. The project connected to that at our level does talk about, you could do things like journeys and so on, and how many the various emissions you could do, and equivalents and so on, as you know. But I suppose it's a difference in the language, isn't it? If you were trying to put targets within policies.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good thing. It's got to be sort of understandable and meaningful, for not just to us but to our residents as well.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, obviously I come back from quite a sort of scientific background with this, but something that I've certainly become much more cognizant of recently, and which we've got embedded in our policy, is what they call the co-benefits. So, the things that can help with people's well-being, with their ability to travel, to get out of fuel poverty or transport poverty, or whatever it happens to be, perhaps things to do with air quality, soil quality, so on. So it's not just about carbon and emissions and gases, although that's perhaps important. It's, and with us it's resilience, we're by the sea, it's to do with flooding and all that kind of thing. So, I think we need to be measuring things and bear in mind what's important to us as a community, because that's what will really help us. And I'm going to stop there because I don't want to be going into a lecture, but Councillor Matthews.
I suppose it's one example, just to refer back to Councillor Honeyman's point. So when we were talking about the print strategy, wasn't it, and we had a long debate about how much paper we use, and it was actually, we just try and reduce it, as opposed to maybe just stop it altogether. But that was a measurable statistic.
Yes.
So, but I'm just wondering, so there's things that the council can do and has control of itself, but also there's our greater ambitions within the town, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
And it's about how we measure that, I suppose.
Absolutely, and I think if I can move on now, if that's okay with everybody, to consider a little bit more the first advisory, which is to discuss and comment upon recommended actions and priorities that would underpin the delivery of the Town Council's climate emergency policy. So this is the appendix here, which is quite lengthy, I must say, but we can take these. I think the idea is to take them one by one, Steve, or see we've got some comments here. So you'll see that there are, apart from the points, there are 5 columns, and one of them, the second column, is the internal action ideas, so things which we could do as a council internally on our own to improve our own ways of working. And then ideas which are a little bit more external, so they might be things to do with our tenants, lessees, partnership, and then partnership working opportunities to do with external action ideas, and just any other ideas that we might capture. So I think the idea with this table, that it was sort of start in-house, if you like, and sort of work out, and then when it comes to devising the actual climate action plan and presenting it, those who have seen many climate action plans, you can sort of imagine perhaps a Venn diagram or a graphic where you've sort of got your own internal, and then you've got your sort of spheres of influence going out. So I hope that would help to sort of guide people's thoughts, I suppose. So shall we go through these? Yes, Councillor Tabas.
I think I might have missed the point here. What exactly is the purpose of, what do you want from us
Okay.
on this? What is
So,
the point of this?
On this, so we brought in the climate emergency policy in late June 2024, and what we wanted to do was to bring that, which is the policy, into our kind of working objectives and what we want to achieve, how we want to run with that operationally. We had the climate change delivery plan, which was a document that kind of served 2023, and some stuff was ongoing 2020, and we've got some stuff that's just continually ongoing, don't we? But essentially a lot of those projects had either been completed or perhaps hadn't progressed for whatever reason, and we were at a point when 2024 we kind of had a void in terms of new things on the ground. So we focused on getting the policy in place. So this is how do we actually implement the policy. We had one strategic project that was identified in the, I've forgotten the name of the document, the town, it was the strategic plan, wasn't it? Which is captured in here. But other than that, so we've got the policy points, of which there were 14, and in the second column you've got the policy, the description of the policy point, and then on the right what I'd really like is a little bit of discussion and any ideas that people might have to realise that policy point. And it doesn't, we don't have to, you know, this isn't a sort of final thing, this is something which we'll take forward to the first GOSCA committee meeting, and then it's envisaged this would form the basis of the climate action plan, which the task and finish group would then work up and talk to partners, talk to other committees about, etc. So it's kind of a foundation document, if you like. Does that help?
So it's just that, you know, I've looked through this and I don't see the how in any of it. And so I worry spending time going through 14 points discussing it when there's no hows
Okay.
in here.
Well, you bring the hows. That's what we're asking. If you'd like to input some ideas into the how we achieve that, that's exactly what we're trying to elicit tonight.
Well, is it for this group to do that, or is it?
I think it would. I think the fact that, you know, we've had the committee, I appreciate you're fairly new to it, and other councillors have been on for a year, 2 years, longer. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to actually put some ideas, think about the draft that's already there, put something together, and then it will be considered further by the GOSCA committee. But I think it will save some, it will bring together the sort of knowledge that people around the table have already got, because we don't know who's going to be on the GOSCA committee. You know, they might want to input some more stuff into it, but I think in the interests of kind of giving the most up-to-date and the most informed handover possible, that's what we're going for with this.
Okay.
So, right, so are we ready to move on to the first point?
It's just a quick related point.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
I was just wondering, again, when I thought of this, I was thinking about those local groups who have come in quite a lot and really contributed strongly. So, partnership working opportunities is going to get logged here. I'm just wondering whether we can have two columns, one of which is, well, make sure we know where the local is and which can be spotted by local people, or local groups, okay? That's us. And then you've got another column which might be from outside or elsewhere. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in that column we can capture both, and I think you know, we obviously do need to capture that. Officers already have working relationships with many of the groups, and many of the groups have come in and contributed to our stuff.
I've really been struck by that, and it's been very positive.
It's absolutely great, and you know, as I said, in case anyone's missed off this tonight, there are further iterations, and it's always an open door, isn't it? And considering things as we go forward, this is just kind of our best capture at the moment. So I'm going to move on because there was, if that's okay, Councillor Meek. Sorry, I didn't see your hand behind me, but there. So our first policy point was really one of the most overarching ones, which was to ensure the council's operations have the lowest environmental impact as reasonably possible. So we have some suggestions here to embed sustainability and resilience criteria in all decision making, and this has come up before, this isn't new for tonight. This actually came in our strategy document to have, alongside our financial implications at the end of every report, to have an environmental implications section so that those could be captured. Again, it may not be exhaustive because councillors may see more things, but it would give officers a chance to put something in the report to really show what the environmental implications of anything is. And how would we do this, considering all our different categories of operations? So that's really something, I suppose, for the town clerk at the time to be thinking about how they do, perhaps through the different departments or events, building management, all the different things that we do. And we've got specific things such as, for example, introducing town council owned vehicles that might have no environmental impact. Now that might be a goer, it might not, and we don't really need to debate that here, but it's just, today is just about capturing ideas. And then again, we've sort of moved on to sustainability requirements in leases or concession agreements, and we already, I believe, work with Plastic Free Seaford in evaluating office stationery equipment sustainability, and our events and concessions already have to be plastic free, as we've seen in this committee, because that's come through us.
Sure.
So,
sorry, can I just add to that last point? We've actually agreed now to add to the concessions licences that the concessions must be prepared to refill recyclable bottles with free tap water.
Excellent.
To prevent the sale of single-use plastic bottles, and that's been added to the concessions licence, which is going to be issued from a. It's not currently in there.
Yeah.
It currently encourages them to support Plastic Free Seaford, but it doesn't
Yeah.
make that a specific commitment.
Okay, thank you. That's really good to know. So that's one. So really, I'm looking for additional things that people want to. I'm going to go to Councillor Matthews first, and then to Councillor DeVos.
So could we take like a case example, I suppose, right? So, say for example, we wanted to get a heat pump up at the View. So one of the internal action ideas might be get a heat pump. So is it then to, obviously we just want to magic one out of thin air, we need to get some costings for it, and then cost to install it, and then measure it against the costs that I suppose that the gas boiler and what the heat pump has provided. So I'm just wondering if we use that as an example, what would that look like on this form?
On here.
Because we want.
So,
I'm just wondering if there's space for money, time, measuring time, because I think that was one of the issues, wasn't it? It was that was we don't want things to drift, so it's like actually we decide this at such and such meeting. Let's review it again at this meeting to get costings or whatever, and then can we afford to do that, and what do we imagine this might, how this would benefit us.
Yeah, okay, let's take that as an example 3. So I'd probably wind that one back and say, okay, we've got a building asset, namely the View. I mean, it could be any of our buildings, and actually one action we do have is to do an energy audit of our buildings, but I'll take this particular one. And what we might be looking for from an environmental point of view is to say, well, how can we run that building more efficiently in terms of energy usage? Maybe how can we make it thermally more comfortable? And of course, everything the council does has got a financial implication, a cost implication. So, yes, it would be, we could either put that under our policy point 1, which I've said is quite sort of overarching, and then further down, have to find it, but there is one which is more to do with buildings.
Number 2.
Is it 2? I've passed it, and I have things in it. Generate its own energy, so it could come under generate own energy from renewable sources where possible. But it's essentially about improving our carbon footprint, hopefully improving thermal comfort, whilst being good value for money, which comes into everything that we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we could put that into number 2. And I think with this, it wouldn't be necessarily we'd have to go into all the detail of how we'd actually action that and realise that in terms of this quotes and that stuff, because that would be operational for the officers really to take forward. But it might be that, for example, you know, it might be something that gets tendered out, it might be a partnership working opportunity, and you know, yes, does that help sort of to see how it would sit? So I think it's sort of taking one back and saying, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve? A heat pump might be one way to achieve something, because actually you might find that a heat pump isn't the best answer for the particular building, but you just want to, you know, it might be that we put some solar on or something, and but you know, that it's that we do that. So I hope that kind of helps, that we don't need to go to too fine a level of detail, but it's just kind of idea capture. Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. I think it immediately raises an important question, that if we are taking these initiatives seriously, and something that's always stopped us in the past is officer time. So, and I think that now that the fact that this subcommittee is going to be profiled as a full committee with the rest of Seaford Head and the Golf, and so it becomes a proper entity in itself, and presumably it should have a budget. Does it have budgeted officer hours allocated to it as well? Because if we do want to, for instance, do some investigation, research, that's going to take quite a lot of officer time.
Yeah.
So I think that's a question, would you be able to answer that?
I would.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yes. So the plan is that obviously the budget was set for the committees as they stand now, because it had to be approved before it was agreed that the new committees would be created. But what we said in the FGMP meeting in December, and again at the full council, is that we would then take the budgets that have been approved for those committees and split them appropriately amongst the new committees, appropriate to where, you know, where the budgets were for, because each line in the budget is for a specific element of each committee. So we can work out how much of it should go to GOSCA, how much of it should go to assets and facilities. And then as part of the restructure, part of the plan is that the Deputy Town Clerk and RFO is the officer representative at personnel and FGMP committees, and the head of place will be the representative at GOSCA and assets and facilities. So they will be a dedicated resource to attend those meetings, take away actions, and then delegate them to their officers that work for them. Obviously there'll be more officers because of the restructure, and hopefully therefore they'll have more capacity to do that work.
Thank you.
That's the plan.
Yeah. And I'll just add on that also we're cognizant that there might be opportunities to link up with other councils related to what you were saying earlier. I don't want to name any names because we haven't had any formal discussions, but to sort of try and tap into specialist knowledge as and when it might be needed. Again, that's something sort of future, but that we're aware of. So, thanks, though. Great point, Councillor Meek. Okay, does anybody
Councillor Dubas.
Yes, Councillor Dubas.
So my point was similar to Councillor Matthews. We cannot have climate emergency implementation at any cost.
Absolutely not.
So there isn't, that does need to be in this plan. It's the costing and also the existing resource. So if you want to go on that one, we've already got a gas boiler. It works fine. We don't need a heat pump. So there has to be a need and a cost analysis as well, and what's already been implemented and costed originally against the new plan.
Absolutely.
It can't be at any cost.
No, that's a great point, Councillor Dubas. And I think the way that this is an ideas document, it's certainly not a something which we're going to red light or green light at the moment. It would need to be looked at and so on. We've got some of these projects which have been identified as strategically important. We've got others at sort of other levels. We do have a 6th strategic objective, and that's going to be something which we're going to have to think as councillors, I anticipate, how we're going to balance that quite going forward, and where is that correct balance point. So yes, absolutely, and I think in terms of all the reports, so this would eventually go to a council, and it would go to a full council report eventually, according to the process. So that would have financial implications in it. So at that, a bit later stage than today, things would need to get costed out, both in terms of costs and officer time. And that may be sort of ballpark figures. It may be in more detail where appropriate. But absolutely, everything needs to be considered in full in the round. So yeah, so this really is an ideas document. So as we're now nearly at 10 to 8, these are all fantastic points, but I am going to push us forward a little bit and just ask, we've got 14 points here. Some of them we might whiz through quite quickly, others you might have more to input to. But I'm going to ask whether anybody's got anything they would like to add as a comment to point 1, which is quite an overarching policy point to ensure our operations have the lowest environmental impact. No? Okay, so we've got the note about the concessions, that they should be prepared to refill recyclable bottles, which is a great one. I think the other things we'll come to in the more detailed points. Is that okay, Councillor Lee? I have to ask you because I can't see your right hand next to me. Right, so we'll move on to point 2, which is to generate its own energy from renewable sources where possible. So internally we've got to consider installing on-site renewables wherever new development or redevelopment occurs. So that just means if we've got a new building, which I know we don't have any at the moment, but perhaps in time we might do, or perhaps something like Seaford Barn, which is yet undecided, but we've had some go ahead in scoping out what we might do with that for redevelopment. So it's to involve in that process considering installing on-site renewables as part of our considerations. And we might partner with local energy services organisations, of which there are a few in the area. And just sort of got some other ideas about what we might be able to do if we had too much energy, if we were ever in such a position, but potentially to sort of feed it back into active travel and low carbon transport and so on. So can I invite any further ideas from the committee members? Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to see that, as far as I know, as far as was reported over the last few years, I don't believe that the solar hot water system on the View is working. And I don't think that's ever been investigated properly. It was put in to start with, and I imagine it worked to start with, but as far as I know, it hasn't been checked, and to my knowledge, it doesn't work. So I think that should be remediated immediately. One of the priority things, we've got something which should be providing hot water at the View, and I don't think it is. It just needs to be mended and fixed and recommissioned.
Thanks very much for that point. Can I just defer to officers? Do you have any knowledge of that at the moment, what its status is?
It has been investigated and it isn't working. But there is some confusion about what it is supposed to power. So that's also being looked at.
It's just hot water.
So is that the hot water supply? It's not solar PV, is it? It's solar thermal. So is that, which aspect of the building that it's supplying essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I believe it should just be providing hot water.
So yeah, we're investigating to make sure it's doing what it should do.
Okay, so that's something which is kind of in train-ish. Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Matthews?
Just kind of going back to kind of, I guess, my own point and Councillor Dumas' point earlier on, and when you use that as the heat pump as an example. So I was just wondering whether it's worthwhile getting like doing those kind of assessments for each building. So perhaps if the gas boiler came to the end of its life, and then we review what, can we find a more environmentally friendly option, and like the hot water solar panel, is that working, is it not working? Then we've got that, and then we know whether to fix it. So it's something that could be on the maintenance man's job description, I suppose. But
yeah, it could be sort of like I suppose the very larger decisions would probably come to council anyway. But in terms of maintenance, to sort of be mindful of the new technologies and new options that are coming forward, and to consider those and involve those in all the
I suppose it's just having that prompt for officers. So if the gas boiler goes out, there's already a document in place to say, okay, we've looked at that, this is how we're going to proceed with moving forward with it. So, you know,
Yeah.
whatever option is we think deemed best.
Yeah, so sort of, yeah. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm looking at the first column, actively research and apply current best practices, which is really important.
Hang on, which page are we on?
Sorry, am I on the right page?
Well, I don't know.
Page 13. Am I gone on too
I'm
far?
on 12, 1.2 at the moment.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm taking this.
That's all right. Has anyone got any more comments on point 2, Councillor?
Yeah, we came up with an idea quite a long time ago to put a solar array into the golf compound on the south-facing bank of the compound, which would be hidden from the national park, and it'd be absolutely perfect. It's a scrub area. It's not particularly well. It's just a bank, and it would be hidden from view. But for a long time in the day, you'd get sun on that, and I think it would be a great area to have a solar array, which could electricity to the view, into battery supply or whatever. And I think we should get Avesco or somebody to look at that and give us a quote and investigate whether that's feasible or not, because it's a wasted resource, I feel. Thank you.
Thanks very much. When you say that you had some discussions and ideas before, did that ever come to a council meeting or not?
We in the subcommittee we
Right.
chucked it around, but of course we didn't have
a route forward.
We didn't have a route forward because we didn't
Okay.
have money, we didn't have officer side time
Yeah.
to investigate it, which is why I think officer time for all these projects is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think other people could maybe, but something like Avesco, we just need to get them to come and look at it and give us an idea.
Yeah.
They'll do it for free, we don't have to pay them, but they will want to obviously do it when they, you know, I don't know. It'd be
Okay,
a very
right.
it'd be a mini scheme, but it's still.
Well, it was
We
something
might be
which-
able to also charge the golf buggies from it. That would be
Yeah.
another thing that you could do, which would be you know, not tapping on our electricity supply.
Yeah, right, okay, so we can capture that one
How
as
do
an
you see
idea.
that working when we've got most of the building leased out to the view? We're going to go to the expense of installing that to give the cafe part free electricity.
Well,
How would that work?
you recharge them.
Recharge, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, no,
So
that's okay. I think,
Through the chair,
Yeah.
we do actually still pay some of the electricity bill at the view for the area that's of the shop and the golf buggies. So it's not entirely their responsibility.
thanks, okay, that's great, good point. Okay, so I'm going to move on to point 3 now, which is to actively research and apply current best practices which have proven to be effective in reducing our carbon footprint. So this is kind of one of those good intention policy points really to try and stay abreast of what the current thinking is and best practice. So it's perhaps a little bit more generic, but as a sort of starter for 10, we've got officers and councillors and being involved, subscribing to relevant information sources. I know the council officers already do subscribe to some. Perhaps the carbon literacy training could come in here. I think it's also coming a bit later on, but we could certainly capture it here. And again, it's sort of, if we've got larger projects that perhaps need more specialist input, it might be looking at whether we need to use a consultant for it and trying to work proactively with other local councils to pool knowledge basically and be the most efficient and effective. Councillor
I'd
DeBuss.
like to remove the use of consultants, that costs money. There's hundreds of councils up and down the country that are willing to share this information for free.
Yeah,
Why do we need
and
consultants?
yeah, I think, you know, this is, again, I think this is an ideas document, we'll take it through to GOSCA. It might be that there's something that's fairly specific to us that would be, that would have merit in considering the use of a consultant, but it doesn't mean that every time we need to use consultants. And absolutely, I think if we're looking at value for money, then partnering with other local councils and organisations and other thinking groups definitely give us more bang for our buck. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I like the term actively research. I wouldn't I? But I think we do, this is what we need. One of the things we need, and I think that we end up with a an appointment or listing an appointment of someone who could be a bid writer. I think we did, and that would, someone who can actively that bid writer needs to be able to actively research, because it's about finding out, where the funding is that we might draw on, and I think there might be quite a lot in this territory that we could do, and so it could end up being, in the end, no cost, because we'll be.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for making that. And I'll come to the town clerk to comment on that further.
Yeah, through the chair, we have a part-time funding and contracts officer that's going to be employed as part of the restructure.
Right, yeah, I thought it was, I couldn't remember what that person was called. Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that's a good, absolutely great illustration that, depending on what funding pots are out there, we might be able to make use of them. And then, for example, if we do need some consultancy help on something specific, depending on the funding criteria, it might come from that, and it might not always come from our pocket, but it might give us the best results. So I think trying to take a sort of holistic approach, but be really mindful of seeing the bottom line is so important.
Can we just add another thing in here? Partnership working opportunities, other local councils, yes. But we also have colleges and universities locally who are doing a lot of work in these areas, and I think, whoever it is going to contact them, but we need to be developing those links.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can capture that, and then, again, even that might sometimes come through other councils who have already got those relationships, but just be mindful that that sort of wave can continue. Councillor Mead.
Chair, could we just particularly identify Lewis District Council, because as our superior council and with their climate sustainability credentials, I think we really should pinpoint asking them for direct help for some of these things. I don't know if you feel the same or not.
I deliberately left out naming other councils, but if the committee feels comfortable in doing so, I shall.
I think you've got to declare your conflict of interest, right?
Well, yeah, some of us are LDC councillors
Exactly,
as well.
that's what I mean. So you've got to be very
I
mindful
think you
of
need
that.
to be specific, do you? It includes Lewis.
Well, I'm only trying to cover yourself.
I think
If you don't
Lewis
say,
would be an obvious one, and others, and neighbouring councils, and other. Yes.
We won't be having
yes.
district councils fairly soon, so we need to.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, right. Let's carry on. So we're going to point 4 now. So that's to instigate environmentally sustainable initiatives and projects. So we've got our internal action idea, which is really a sort of project process point, I suppose, which is that any new project should be assessed for the opportunity to better its sustainability criteria in accordance with the policy. So I suppose really that's just thinking, we've got several policies at the council, and I would like to think that any new project is kind of viewed through the lens of each of those policies, this being one of the, I'll say one of the key ones because it's related to our strategic objectives, but certainly it's something we want to be balancing. And then we've got external action ideas to encourage any third-party activities which take place on our land to be as low impact and as sustainable as reasonably possible. And that might happen through, I think we already identified leaseholders and concession holders, so it might be through events, and whatever that sort of mechanism is, that's not necessarily for us to pin down here, but that's sort of how we might be able to influence, have a slightly wider influence. And partnership working opportunities, so there might be opportunities with schools, for example, engagement with the Ouse Valley Climate Action Project, especially as it's looking now towards legacy planning, sort of what happens next, what's going to be left behind, and what sort of gifts to the community are ongoing. Other local councils, got a specific idea here, which I'm sure I'm not the first person to have thought of it, but it has occurred to me for quite a while that we have a lot of vehicles which sit idling along the seafront. In the summer, they've got their aircon on, and in the winter they've got their heating on. And actually on the highway code, you're not supposed to sit idling at all. I'm not quite sure whether the highway code applies to our sort of parking areas on the seafront or not, but certainly in the eastern area we're nearer to wildlife, we're nearer to a triple SI, and I know from my own experience walking along that it's sometimes just quite unpleasant. You're trying to go for a walk and get some fresh air, and more often than not you've got diesel or petrol fumes. So there have been some quite successful no idling campaigns around schools, and perhaps that's something we might be able to think about in the future, perhaps think about partnering with some other local organisations to deliver, if that's something we feel is important. But so that's just an idea. I'd like to throw the floor open to any other ideas that might come into this category. Councillor May.
Nothing like just a comment, Chair, on what you just said. I think that these are all great things. I mean, I've had experience. You talk to people if they're just sitting in their cars, and they basically tell you to sod off or whatever. I think we need to do it in a different way than because the enforcement issue is the problem. How do you enforce it? And I think you've got to do it by a kind of moral, compunction, by shaming them into not. I mean, I did talk to somebody, and in fact, in my road, and she was just sitting in his car. And I said, no, do you need to have your car on? And he said, oh, well, I'm charging my phone. I said, well, it's just that, this is a route to school for kids, and they're walking past and your diesel fumes are coming out as they're walking to school. And then they're going, oh, yeah, mate, oh, right, now, but I was up on the Seaford Head, and the Border Force van was up there with its engine on for about half an hour. I took the dogs down and brought it back. They were still on. Oh, we've got to charge up the computer, because otherwise we can't liaise with the people at the bottom of the cliff. So there's always an excuse. It's very difficult to actually get the result you want. Yeah. But I think maybe do it by education and by shaming, if you like. Shame them into doing what you want them to do. And I did think about litter on the seafront. I think, if you could get children to make paintings, say, please don't wreck our seafront, it's much more kind of poignant than just a notice saying, you'll be fined if you drop litter kind of thing. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Mick. I think I'd like to sort of try and take that forward, if you don't mind, in sort of a constructive way there. And I think, it's how do you get people to change their behaviour? Is it with a stick? Is it with a carrot? Is it something else? Do we try and shame them? Do we not? And I think this is actually, from what I've gleaned through my sort of working life, is a really hot, big topic that's coming forward. How do we instigate? How do we support behaviour change? What are people's barriers to that change? How do we identify those, and how do we help them? How do we do we want a positive environment? Do we want somewhere with loads of signs saying thou shalt not, or do we want to actually be explaining these things a little bit, and so people sort of the penny drops and say, oh, that's why, and then we maybe move to a new sort of positive culture where people can respect that and so on. So I will, on the back of that, I might suggest that perhaps councillors and officers, if suggest officers, town clerks' approval, might like to look at attending some behaviour change training, of which I know there is some available locally and online, and then perhaps think about how we can best go about these things and how we want to try and, it's obviously not just applicable to this particular thing, but to things like, other committees we've been talking about, dog mouse. I think that's the chair stop speaking alarm. But sort of how do we go about this, and what tools do we have, and how can we best do that? So I think actually looking at behaviour change in terms of environment, whether it's climate change, whether it's litter, dog mess or whatever, might be quite a valuable thing for us to do as we can.
Depends if there's a cost.
Yes.
You're preaching to the converted. It's the ones that don't want to be converted that aren't going to change the behaviour by going on a behaviour training course. So
no. I mean, the behaviour change training is more for the people who take the decisions about how we want to put things through. Granted, there are always going to be a few people who you don't reach, but maybe we can reach more if we change the way we're approaching it, is what I'm trying to float at the moment. But anyway, I'm going to be quiet now and ask anyone if they've got any other particular ideas on this point. No? Okay, in that case,
I've just got a bee in my bonnet about, I think we ought to try and find somewhere for a natural burial site on our huge estate. And I think this would, I drafted something ages ago, probably about 3 years ago, it's actually a business idea, if we could get it, get our stakeholders to agree. But this would take quite a bit of time to evaluate. It might take some officer time. So I just put that into the mix as an idea, because it's otherwise you've got everybody driving to Eastbourne or wherever and being cremated.
Okay, so we can put that as an idea in. Have you got an opinion, a view about where that would best fit?
I think
It's
I would
sort of
rather not say.
no?
I've got a very good idea.
No, I don't mean sort of where, I mean here.
Oh, in that, yeah,
Table.
sorry.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Just
You're going to say my front garden then.
Other ideas.
Other ideas.
It's
So
a
we
natural
can
burial
put
site.
natural burial site. It's all up for discussion. And again, when it gets to Goscar, we can see,
It's not
but
my
we're
garden.
capturing it. Okay, so number 5 in our sort of advisory role, so continuing to improve performance to prevent all types of pollution from activities, including greenhouse gases. So we've got something here that I know has been spoken about, which is looking into green or low carbon energy tariffs for our utilities, so that's particularly with regards electric. I know that's sometimes difficult because, like here, we're leasing part of the building, aren't we? But you know, perhaps that's something that can be looked at in other places when the time comes. We've got a point around farming practices, perhaps in conjunction with the tenant farmer and what may or may not be possible there. Partnership working opportunities. Engagement with local organisations, those who lease our assets as well. I'm actually going to I would like to put in there as a comment myself, the new NNR that's coming forward, because that might help us. And then I will ask anybody else whether you've got anything you'd like to input. Councillor DeVas.
So if you want to improve anything, you've got to start with a baseline number. And
Yeah.
so you need to have that in there. What are the baseline numbers?
Yeah, okay, so we need a baseline. We do have some baseline in our carbon footprinting stuff, and there is an action to be auditing the buildings. So in terms of that, we do have some baselining in the form, sorry, this is mostly pollution. Maybe it's pertinent to a different one, but I was going to say in terms of biodiversity stuff, because the Natural History Society do a lot of surveys and baselining for that. So yeah, great point. Any other comments or ideas to add in? Councillor Meek?
Just to say, I think this actually extends to various other bits because it mentions the tenant farmer. I think we need to work a lot more closely with our tenant farmer, because you know we do let the land to her. And as the landowner, I think we can't just give a tenant, anybody who's a tenant, carte blanche to do whatever they want in the way they want to do it. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to put some stipulations in place. She's a very nice lady, and actually, I know had a long talk with her before Christmas to just find out where she was at. And I think she's just trying to assess, since her husband died about a year before, she's just trying to manage going forward for the next couple of years to find how she goes forward, and also because farmers have no idea what the government is going to do to support them at the moment, because they haven't come forward with a proper plan ever since the EU dissolved what their subsidies. So I would love us to engage more with the farmer, and judging by what we are told, the way farming is done is quite a big contributor to greenhouse gases. So we need to look at that and encourage, we'll talk about carrot and stick, I think we need to encourage by engaging with her and trying to help her find out more sustainable practices. I would love us to be able to do that to help her into farming better and for her livelihood. And maybe we can find also some alternative forms of income for her, which I think we could come up with some ideas for that as well, on our using our land in different ways.
Where is that? Can I? It's
Chinkton Farm.
Chinkton Farm, Seaford Head
But
area. Can I just?
would you like to say?
Yeah, I think there's some really great points in there, Councillor Meek, and I think that as well as through the Seaford Head Local Nature Reserve Management Committee, which I know several of us attend and sit on, including our tenant farmer, that could be one forum which we could try and utilise a bit more. But also I'd come back to the National Nature Reserve forthcoming, if that goes through, that there are some great partners in there, including the National Trust, who have been working with other farmers in the area, looking at exactly these types of things. So that would really be a forum and a vehicle by which we might be able to sort of take advantage of that, and achieve some of that optioneering, I suppose, without using too much of our own resources and time, because there are people who already do this stuff. So
through the chair, I'll just add that we are currently renegotiating the lease for the tenancy to change over from the estate of her husband to her.
Okay.
And as part of that, I believe we have to, is that right, Sharon? We have to work with her to create a farm operating plan, that was called. That has to be part of the transfer of the deed.
Right.
And so in due course we will be bringing it back to full council, because it's a disposal of land matter, for approval for the lease to be given to her. But alongside that, the farm operating plan will be produced as well. Now I think we're looking to her to drive most of the contents, but it's something which we have to work with her too, and I think Sharon and her team are already on top of that.
that's great to hear. Fantastic. Thanks. That's a really valuable insight. Councillor Mick, would you like to come back?
Well, just I wonder, so what would be the best way for any ideas we have to feed into that? Would it be through this committee, or would it be directly to officers, because you're trying to make a draft lease with her out of these committee system in a way? What do you think?
Chair, is it okay if I answer?
Oh yes.
I think that would be best to come through to me and the officers, so that whilst we're having these meetings and discussions, that we can explore any of the suggestions.
Okay.
Okay, so we've
I'll go that way.
got a route there. Thank you very much. That's
Do you have
great.
a time
Through the
frame?
chair, sorry, just to clarify, the lease and the FOP are different things, but my understanding is that to get the lease registered, you have to also have an FOP.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not the same thing.
Okay.
It's like an addition to the lease.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we perhaps could make some suggestions into it.
Yeah.
Do we have
Okay.
a time for it? Chair, do we have a time frame?
I'm not sure we do.
I believe we're looking to bring the lease itself back to the next full council, but the FOP doesn't have to be done at the same time. It's just ideal, but it could be delayed, because it's to do with registering it rather than the lease.
Okay. So the one isn't.
No, councillors might remember that one of the items for the agenda at the last full council was to approve the farm lease. It was delayed because there were issues that we weren't able to resolve in time for the deadline of the papers. So we are trying to bring the signing of the lease to full council, but the farm operating plan isn't yet completed. So we would look to bring the lease and then later bring the farm operating plan, because the farm operating plan doesn't need full council approval.
Would the farm operating plan come to GOSCA?
I don't know. Is the
Okay,
answer.
to be
We
decided.
could come back to that.
Okay. All right, we'll make
Thank
a
you.
mental note of that one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So this,
Yes, Councillor Hanley.
It's quite interesting, obviously, if someone does pass away. I mean, I'm surprised it has to go to full council. Well, is it not by default that you can?
Through the chair, the lease was in his name only.
There was no clause or anything.
No, the lease was in his name only, so it's now sitting with the estates of him, and for it to be issued to her, it needs to be a new lease.
So it's legal and probate and all that stuff, I imagine. Okay, right, without getting too detailed on that, but fascinating and important though it is, I'm going to move on now to point 6. So this one is really talking about some of these co-benefits that I touched on earlier. So working with organisations who support health and well-being of Seaford residents through the provision of information, whether it's home energy efficiency measures, other measures perhaps, in addition to just reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got the Seaford Health Stakeholder Working Group, which I know some councillors, officers, do we have officers on that? Yeah. External sort of action ideas that we could help to facilitate, such as social prescribing programmes. I know there's already one which is just starting up with the Seaford Community Garden and the Seaford medical practice. Possible, oh sorry, yes, I've got that already on the next thing, partnership working opportunities. So organisations such as Avesco, I know there are others too, and Avesco recently held a warm homes talk, actually it was only last week, doing just this, providing information to residents about home energy efficiency. So there are some examples there. I'd be interested to know from if there are any other ideas tonight which we might be able to capture on this theme.
Seems quite self-explanatory.
Yeah,
I think.
okay, Councillor Tony.
One obvious example in terms of another organisation is the Friends of Bishopstone Station, who already
Okay.
do a lot of this
Yeah,
and are really the predominant audience there, or participants, are older people.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay, that's great. Yes, they do organise a lot of sort of information events and things. And I think,
it's
you know,
fantastic what they do there.
okay, that's great.
Mm.
So yeah, so we can capture that as a potential partnership working opportunity. I know we've supported them in other ways.
Yeah, we have, and they know us.
And they know us, and I think there's some co-promotion of things on social media perhaps already. If there isn't, perhaps we might be able to look at that if we
Jim
do end up
Stafford is the
partnering with
lead
them.
person.
But getting that message out to residents that these things are available and they are there, and that's great, especially because it's, you know, we have a lot going on in the town centre and they're kind of down that towards Bishopstone obviously. So yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. Right, I'll move on to point 7 if everybody's alright. So minimise the production of waste from our own activities, adhere to the principles of the waste hierarchy, so that's to reduce, reuse, recycle, compost wherever possible. Internally, I know that this is already something which we do in the offices, which officers have already implemented. I'm looking at the town clerk and Sharon. Would you like to add to
Yeah, there
that?
is some further information. Obviously, we don't organise all of the services that come in and out of this building. So there is some work happening at the moment to look at that and what happens with the current contracts.
Okay, great. So it's sort of keeping contracts under review, I suppose. Yeah. So maybe that internal or external or somewhere in the middle. But anyway, we can put it. We can put it across. So.
The waste of emptying the bins and the recycling of the cardboard or any other recycling materials.
So it's the council bins.
Yes.
So Sussex Police are responsible for the emptying of rubbish here, but there is a new law coming into effect in March, I think it is, which requires a simpler recycling process to be done, which means that businesses over a size of 10 individuals have to have waste collected separately from recycling, separately from food waste, like houses have done for a number of years. Businesses of over 10 individuals have to have that from, I think it's March. And so we're liaising with Sussex Police in terms of where the waste goes from here. And I believe that they're putting that in place.
Great. Thanks very much for that update. That's good to know. And Councillor Meek.
Just wondering whether we're all working towards the paperless committees.
Yes, I think we've had that discussion on the print and paper strategy. And I think we're going there. And I'll come into my life cycle assessment, but how much is in one of these as well? You know, it's all got to come into the equations. But yes, I'd like a small one, personally. I'm not going to say anything else on camera.
This was my daughter's laptop before.
Fantastic, there we go. Even better. So we've got a whole item on our urban grass cutting scheme, and if we do end up going to cut and collect, what we will do with the risings, etc, etc. So we've just sort of captured here that that is something that we can have some influence over in the future, and who we would work with, obviously our grass cutting contractors, and we might be working with other parties if, for example, we find somewhere that we want to essentially, I'm trying not to use the word dump, but they do call it a dump, I think, of the arisings in some cases, that it actually goes on sort of sacrificial land, whether it could ever go into compost or, you know, any other sort of usable form. Perhaps it might be working in some cases I know in more rural areas, a farmer might come and cut an area on the understanding that he can take away the grass and use it for hay. I'm not suggesting we can necessarily do that with our urban grass, but just sort of to be aware of what happens a bit more widely, and what opportunities there might be out there.
If I can just say, if you could say, there
Yeah.
is the possibility of the tenant farmer potentially being interested in that as well, which is something else which we can explore as part of that FOP.
That's great, because that's something that had occurred. So that'd be really good. And again, in terms of partnership working, and maybe just sort of in terms of advice, when I was on the National Nature Reserve day trip, I'll call it, so where we sort of went round all the different sites, I had some quite good conversations with the ecologist from Lewis and Eastbourne Borough Council, particularly pertinent to Eastbourne, about arisings and what they do with it and cut and collect, and also with the national park and potentially working with farmers as well. So in terms of partnership working opportunities, again, it's something we might bounce off some of the NNR partners in time. Or maybe we need to do it before then, I'm thinking. But anyway, there are people there who we can talk to. Does anybody else have any thing they would like to add to this point 7? No? Okay, I shall carry on to point 8. I'm starting to rattle through these a bit now. Encourage the use of low emissions transport options in continuing to develop safe walking, cycling and mobility scooter routes, and promote cycling, scootering and walking around the town for health as well as positive environmental benefits. I will say, when this was written, I don't think anyone had e-scooters in mind. And I was nearly run into by one this afternoon, an e-scooter. But yes, wheeling, I think, is the sort of catch-all term that's used these days. So, again, these are just ideas. And, you know, we've got research schemes or enable, encourage. I mean, staff, it could be counsellors, to use public transport or active travel. I don't know what we have in terms of cycle to work or these kind of schemes available to employees, whether the town clerk might want to comment on that. But sort of more widely, co-promoting the awareness of active travel opportunities. So we had like the integrated transport map at the station. I think you were there, Councillor Meek, weren't you, for when that came out. So you get off the train and what can you then use public transport wise to get to other places. Seaford Community Partnership have got 2 strands of a project on the go to help facilitate cycling. One was the study that we've also considered. Did we have it at this committee, I think, or planning and highways? I now can't quite remember. But we certainly had a presentation from the transport consultants on that. It's mostly for East Sussex County Council, but there are elements in that for us. And then Sustrans also got some projects going on locally in the area which we might be able to tap into. So that's kind of a starter. I'm just wondering if anybody else, I'll go Councillor Matthews and then come this way.
So I was just looking at the first, well, it's all one sentence, isn't it? The first part of it. So it says encourage use of low emissions transport options and continuing the safe development to develop safe cycling, etc. Could we add or include encourage, promote and inform use of low emissions? So we make a commitment to like, I don't know
what I can see what you're getting at. I think we can't change the policy here. The policy will get reviewed at the first GOSCA meeting. So in terms of informing, perhaps we could here take that. We can either take it as an action, into one of the actions is to help advise and inform people of what there is, or we can also make a note to say that perhaps at the next GOSCA meeting that we consider changing that policy slightly. So I don't know how strongly you feel about that and which route you might wish to go.
Yeah, I think maybe GOSCA first, but I guess maybe something on our town website if there isn't already. Buses around town, that kind of thing. So
maybe a bit more signposting.
More signposting to
transport. Okay, so we could. Yeah.
Low emission options.
Yeah. Okay. So if we put
or even like
Signposting, public
activities that are
transport
outside.
and other information sources
Yeah.
on the website. Right, okay, thanks. Okay, great. Anybody? Councillor Demas?
2 points.
Yeah.
Wasn't aware there were any multiplicity scooter routes. I find them a nuisance if I'm cycling and then I'm going at a fair speed and then this mobility scooter comes at me on the cycle path. Is that allowed? Is it?
I think it depends where you are.
On the
We've
seafront.
obviously got shared use on the seafront, so
By the buckle. It's not shared use, is it? That is a cycle path. That is a walking path.
Yeah, we need to inquire with, I think the council responsible for that bit of cycle path, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, we need to inquire, that's a
And
county
if you
council
get a
question.
mobility scooter, you're screwed because
I'll put
you
it
can't
in
carry
there.
on and take up the whole path.
I appreciate what you're saying,
So
I appreciate
that's
what
quite
you're saying. I'm
one.
sure there's a place for them, whether it's on the prom or there, but
Path,
we'll find.
not the cycle path.
Two in a way.
And the other thing is, can we check with LDC for the frequency, quality and scale of cutting back on cycle paths? Because quite often if you go past the bridge and then you go along towards New Haven, they'll cut back, but the growth is last year's to there, then it's to there, then they'll cut back to there. They don't cut back to the beginning. So you never, that path is getting narrower and narrower.
Yeah. That's a great point, Councillor
Yeah.
Demas. It is, I know it's a county responsibility because I was there in person geotagging that stuff every 5 paces and putting it on the what 3 words and putting it into the East Sussex County Council officers. I know there have been volunteers, and there are volunteers who shouldn't have to, but who do go and cut things back. And it has been actually quite an issue down sort of west of Seaford, because I know there have been events with different like cycling projects and things, and it's been tricky to use that path. I'm going to not dwell on that here because it's not a town council issue, but I'm aware of it, and I think that's something which we should take forward through the appropriate avenues and maybe get a head start on this summer. But yes, we are kind of at the mercy in some ways of other councils and organisations in terms of, we don't control all our infrastructure network with active travel, with walking even, but what can we do? I don't know if anyone's, I'm struggling to remember now who originally came up with it, but people were looking at maps of Twittons in Seaford to help walkers to get from A to B and in the most direct way, for example, and be able to use their car at home if they found that walking was a lot quicker. We've got a lot of Twittons in Seaford, and having grown up here, they're a great delight to find out you can actually get somewhere on foot much faster often than you can by car, especially with the parking these days. So, perhaps that's an idea which might be reinvigorated again. But these are the kind of things, just making it more sort of user-friendly. What can we do on our estate? We've already got cycle racks coming into the Salts and potentially other places, South Hill Barn. So, we're making small steps. But if anyone's got any other ideas for now, we can put them down. Councillor
There's a
Taylor?
group called Cycle Without Age,
Yep, Cycling Without Age, yeah.
who are, I think, becoming a bit more known.
Yep, thanks. I'll put those down in the partnership working opportunities. Thank you.
I think we just need to make sure that we're using our ability or our position really to inform and promote those activities.
Yeah, okay, so that's sort of informing and promoting. Okay, brilliant, right. Yes, sorry, Councillor Halliwell, I didn't see.
A couple of things, mobility scooters, you're talking about the set-on ones, aren't you, those ones? Is that what you're talking about?
I think it's really just to
Away
capture
sort.
how anybody...
Well, I've seen them, admittedly at daylight hours, just go down the normal road, and I don't know if that is that illegal or not, well, unlawful, I don't know what the right term is, but I have seen it when I
Depends
out
on the
area.
scooter. Some
Yeah.
scooters are legal, some are not.
What, to go on the road?
They're road, some of the mobility scooters are
Right.
road enabled and some of them are not. The smaller ones are not.
Thank you.
And
That's really...
also the publicity at the start of 25, obviously sometimes you get groups who start off the new year with certain policy announcements or lack of government making their mind up. E-scooters, that still hasn't been clarified about are they legal on certain paths, not paths and so on. And some countries you are allowed to do it, but not this one. It's a little bit, so promoting e-scooters is quite a tricky one to do unless you promote it in the right way.
Absolutely, I think they're great points, and I think the thing about highways and mobility scooters, it's not really for us to push on that. I mean, it's you know, it may be an issue, and the e-scooters thing, absolutely, it's still quite a grey area. There have been some pilots and trials in some cities, haven't there? But here certainly it's not. And again, you know, with a town council, it's not really within our remit to be looking at that. But I do hear what you're saying. So
I mean, I don't know whoever's going to tidy this up. I don't know if that's you, Sharon, but anyway, whoever it is tidying up this policy, and you have an input. You're going to sort of say if it really is a town council function, or if it's clearly not, are you going to sort of say it's not, or you're going to leave it a little bit free, a bit floating?
I think some things obviously cross over. So, for example, the cycling study. So that looked at Seaford as a whole. It looked at routes. It looked at cycle parking. It looked at particular journeys that people already make. It was quite comprehensive. And so, for example, a piece of work like that, which was externally funded, it's something for, as we have done, we've looked at it and we've said, okay, what are the recommendations, and which of those recommendations apply to facilities and assets that are owned by us, and what can we do? So, for example, the cycle parking's come out of that. But what we haven't come forward with is, for example, how to improve cycling around the lower school or the upper school, which is something much more to do with highways and East Sussex County Council, if it ever gets to that.
And the school itself.
So, yeah, and the school itself, of course. So, you know, I think it really is about focusing on what we can focus on, and there'll be times when we need to partner if we want to achieve something bigger, or if we want to perhaps, you know, remove a barrier that there is. But we'll just have to be savvy as we go along and address things as they come, I think. I'm going to move on now because the evening's going on. So number 9, work closely with suppliers and contractors to reduce the social and environmental impact of goods and services. So this is really about procurement, I suppose, goods and services, considering issues such as carbon footprint, single-use plastics, fair trade goods. Internally, researching the impacts of procured goods and services. I don't know whether that, you know, I'm not up to speed with F&GP. We've got our chair of F&GP here tonight, which is great, Councillor Duvasse, but also the town clerk. In terms of our procurement, we've got a goods and services policy, don't we, or a process at least, that I was looking at. I don't know when that's next up for review, and I don't quite know what happens already. If there's scope to be starting to include these kind of considerations in how we source our supplies.
Well, I mean, on tenders, we've just started to do that and include that in the questions, but in terms of day-to-day operational purchases, how much officer time is going to be involved? Because we've already said we don't have officer time, so then for them to then look at every single piece of, every pack of pens that we buy, how realistic is it for us to ask these questions? I don't think it exists at the moment, does it?
Through the chair, we don't do that at the moment, no, I don't think. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of large goods and services, or significant goods and services where we're going to buy in a service and there's one who's more environmentally friendly than another, that can be a factor. But yeah, I mean, it can't go right down to a pack of pen.
Yeah. Sharon, do you have something to add?
I mean, we do, when we're looking at working with different contractors or sourcing something, we do look to shop locally. And environmental is considered on some elements of product that we purchase, but I think it's back to Councillor Duvasse's point there.
So I think it's one of these things that's it's got to be proportionate to the resources that we have, looking at our ambitions and finding that balance point, isn't it?
It can be done because we don't have to do it. All we do is ask the question, how do you, as supplier A, do this, B and C, and you score it as you do in a tender. But not if you're spending a fiver. We'd have to come up with some sort of
cost benefit analysis, isn't it?
Anything over £400
or it could be when something's renewed, or for example, and there are various certifications on some products, aren't there, and so on. But again, it's always that cost, and I think a lot of that is going to be down to officers. Those kind of decisions are an operational decision a lot of the time, and it might be something for officers to think about sort of cumulatively in the future.
I mean, I think it talks there, doesn't it, about considering issues. It's about having it in your mindset that it's something that you should consider. Even if it's not necessarily the reason why you go ahead with the procurement in each case.
That's kind of what you do at home, really, isn't it? Or I find myself doing, go way up whether something's more environmentally friendly than something else.
And if there's a price difference or not. Absolutely. So, Councillor Meek, you had a point, did you?
Yes, please. I think this draws, it's a very important issue here, because I think there will be a conflict. Because you come across a supplier who supplies something which is much more environmentally friendly, and then you find that they're more expensive. So what do? And this is exactly the whole point of having a climate change issue, a designation within your council about you weigh up the financial against the environmental. But if it always comes out that that financial is going to take precedence, we will never do the right thing, if you like, if you think the right thing is to be more climate aware and environmentally aware. And I think it's going to make that we're going to have to make some decisions about this, that sometimes we might have to pay more for something because actually it's morally and ethically right to do that. And the trouble, I do remember we raised an issue about electricity supply before, so quite some time ago, and we weren't stuck in a contract on that. I know we had a 3-year contract, so it didn't actually arise, but I could see going forward that it would be a question of, well, you could go for a greener electricity supply, but it's going to be more expensive. But actually that's better sitting with our environmental credentials we're trying to have. So I raised the issue that F&GP might be fighting with us as GOSCA on some of these issues, and we're going to have to find a meeting ground somewhere. And actually it would be good maybe, to have the chair of F&GP on this committee as well in the future if we go forward, because these things are very crucial to how we perceive ourselves as a council. So, there's not much point in saying we want to have climate action if we're not prepared to really go for it. I think,
The promise of excellent debate in the future. Thank you, Councillor Meek, and certainly food for thought.
I'm going to get over the middle.
Right, okay, I'm going to carry us forward on to point 10. We're nearly there now. So, yes.
Through the chair, when we were going through these, we sort of identified that this one is very similar to point 9 and 7.
It is. I think, so I think I'm going, unless anyone's got anything particularly I think really the only difference here was to use things efficiently, and that is an operational consideration, and I think unless anyone's got any burning points or burning disagreements, I will move on to point 11. So this one really does start on a new strand of biodiversity and helping us with the crisis in the nature crisis, really, that's so accompanying of the climate crisis at the moment. So to protect, conserve and enhance the town's natural environment and its biodiversity, whilst improving our open spaces, public rights of way and green corridors. How very apt to be taking this forward to the GOSCA committee, which by its title will be on open spaces. So, things which we might consider internally, we don't have an explicit renaturing policy, do we, at the moment? So whether we need to maybe look at that or maybe incorporate part of that into the climate emergency policy and take that forward in some way, that's something which we could consider perhaps this year at our climate emergency policy review, or at a future date. I don't know how often it How often do policies normally get reviewed, Town Clerk? Is it?
It varies from one to
Varies,
another, but
okay.
part of the restructure is going to see a governance and policy manager and officer installed.
Right.
And one of their key objectives to start with is to review the policies that we've got and make
Okay.
sure that they are fit for purpose and up to date,
Okay.
and that they will have a sensible review date added
Yeah.
to them where that doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you for that, that's great. Okay, so to be decided but in hand. So we've got things, we had a paper on, we're calling it Swift Bricks, but it was really about supporting urban dwelling birds. So for example, if we are having any type of redevelopment to a building, we would be wanting to consider whether we can incorporate measures to facilitate nesting sites, if that's sensible and if it's practicable. There are loads of partnership working opportunities here. We had, as we referred to earlier, an excellent information evening. I can't remember when it was now, was it the first one? August a year ago, where we were really lucky to have several organisations come in and explain to councillors what they do and what they achieve. So a lot of them now are coming under the sort of umbrella of Seaford Action for Nature, which is really handy, I suppose, to have that sort of one website and one point of contact. But in particular, we've worked with Seaford Swifts and Seaford Natural History Society, do a lot with our sort of renaturing in our parks as it is. So I'll open it up to ideas and comments, and Councillor Matthews.
Just a comment really, I think this is something that we've been doing anyway, and I think it's good that it's captured because we're doing it. So we're looking at those options and opportunities, so yeah, and you can tell by the information that's on that page how much work we're already doing. So
Could I just say, Chair, I mean, we should have trees for Seaford and then across,
Yes.
because I mean, we
Keep
have been
thinking
working
they're
with
onto
them for
Seaford,
ages.
but they're not, are they?
Because they do a huge amount and increasing.
Yeah. Absolutely, thank you very much. So we've got trees for Seaford as well. Any other ideas?
Well, that's only what I submitted to you in my email.
Which I have skim read, so please enlighten us.
Seaford Hedge Fund.
Yeah.
Get people to invest in Seaford Hedge Fund, and they will get great benefit, huge dividends. It pays huge dividends for social well-being, environmental well-being, and the environment of Seaford. So you could get involved in planting hedges. We ought to designate some areas for hedges, amongst our many holdings, and we could get people involved with planting hedges, and the benefits they receive are, unknown. Or will be. I just think it would be a great thing to try and promote as a kind of as if it's a kind of hedge fund that you would invest in. But you invest, you don't get what you get out is benefit. It's community benefit.
do you like to play on words?
Yeah. So just for anyone who might be watching this at home.
Well, just because it's Seaford Hedge Fund LLP.
This is an idea to increase the hedgerows we've got, which would increase the habitat that's suitable for various wildlife, including hedgehogs,
Yes.
which is the double entendre in it. So it's a lovely idea. Thanks for bringing up such a prickly subject.
Oh, you had to, didn't you?
I had to, yes. We used to have very prickly hedgehogs. I will say I really like this kind of idea. It sounds very attractive. I will go back to saying what I would be fascinated to learn more about is actually our urban wildlife, and whether any of our local groups, I know that they do surveys, but whether they've sort of actually come together and done, I don't, it doesn't have to be an involved ecosystem model, but sort of working out how the species depend on each other, because something that I've known to be very important is taking a sort of ecosystem approach to things. And we might say, okay, there were lots more hedgehogs, I don't know, 50 years ago than there are now. Perhaps that was a good thing. Perhaps it was a fluctuation in the population dynamics. Do we want so many hedgehogs these days? Perhaps we do. Perhaps we don't. How does that affect? What eats hedgehogs?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Gypsies. Oh.
But they use
Well, that's what
insects, don't they? And things,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so sort
Yeah,
of
very, very
how
good
does that, if we had more hedgehogs, would the number of insects go down? How would that affect the flora and all this kind of stuff? So, you know, you could probably carry on and on, but the point I'm getting at is that I don't think we should necessarily look at one species in isolation, and we should think about our urban environment as an ecosystem and how we can balance that, and what are the threats to that ecosystem getting out of balance, and what do we see there. And I'm sure there's a lot of great information out. I know other places have sort of urban wildlife festivals and things to get people involved, and a lot of our groups do a lot of great stuff already. So yes, with a bit of balance for other species. One thing if I may, I don't know if anyone's got anything else to add just now, but a little while ago we had the undertaking to, I can't remember whether we actually agreed to purchase the additional bus stop, Steve. I know you emailed me about it, but we were certainly from East Sussex County Council, weren't we? And then they were going to have the green roofs on the bus stop, so you know that might be something that can come into this as well as an external action idea. But there's a lot that could be done, and particularly with working, I think, with partnership working with it's other councils, other assets, you know, in terms of looking at corridors and things, and what can give us the most sort of bang for our buck with doing things. But yes, it's going to be a larger part of things, and it's really something which residents engage with, and it's got those co-benefits, so great. Right, we're nearly there now, so point 12. So this one is talking about protecting and conserving the town's built environment and heritage by ensuring that any development is as sustainable as reasonably practicable with sufficient infrastructure to support it, and that the development meets the highest possible environmental standards. So we've got under internal action ideas, so for our town council heritage proposals to consider sustainability and low environmental impact factors. So really I think this one is getting towards making any recommendations to planning and highways. So for example, if there is a development, can we consider how to do it in the best possible way? If we're retrofitting perhaps an old building or something like that, how can we do that sensitive to its heritage but also sensitive to environmental needs? And I suppose it's really about making that link with planning and highways, and I think Councillor Buchanan would be okay with me saying this has really come kind of from his perspective, having worked as a buildings engineer, to try and influence planning and so on, and show that actually in Seaford we want things to be as sympathetic as possible. So does anybody have any comments on that, Councillor Honeyman?
So this is the wider picture. This could be anyone's building or development, whether it's Seaford. Is that how I read it?
I think in terms of the external stuff, it could be. And obviously, we are an advisory. We have that advisory role when.
Yeah, you know, we don't have to have a planning and highways committee for. We're not statutory committees.
No, we're not.
We generally do, though. But what I was going to say is, there's various heritage statements do get put in, as you know, with various applications. There's certain criteria depending on what the application is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where someone will do a heritage statement within the conservation areas or listed building, like if there's something happened at the church, that would full. Well, then you'll have to have the diocese, wouldn't it, involved, for example. So what I was trying to say is a lot of that probably is sort of done anyway. But it's the wider picture of, I don't know what you mean by, what you expect the Planning and Highways Committee to look at. That's all. I was trying to work out what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think.
Consideration of what, yeah.
I think that's probably something that certainly I would probably defer to Councillor Buchanan, unless it's sort of within our own things. Councillor Matthews, you had a...
So yeah, just on from Councillor Homan's point really. So I think what you're saying is, just to probably make it clear, is so if we're making recommendations to planning and highways or whoever we're making recommendations to, is it's got to have a climate action or environmental element to that. So there'll be lots of things we'll be asking questions about, won't there? Thinking about the local plan at the moment. But I think what you're saying is it must have got to incorporate the climate change element into those recommendations of advice
Yeah, or at least
or lobbying.
consider
Yeah,
it as
yeah,
part of that
yeah.
process,
Well, that's
whether it ends
whether
up
we
being
make that
recommended
clearer.
or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You haven't got any control over that.
No,
So if somebody
yeah.
wants an extension, you've got no control over who they employ to build that extension. So if you can't control it, there's no point in having it in there.
Planning gets complicated, Chair, as you know, 'cause
Yeah.
we start getting building regs in the end,
Yeah.
which is outside the scope of what we're doing on planning.
Yeah.
I think what I'm
Actually,
thinking about-
Councillor Meek, you've got access to the officers, haven't you, Lewis District?
Councillor Meek?
Yes, but the trouble is that they can't insist on
Well,
very
they are,
much.
then.
You can only insist on what the NPPF says, or the construction industry mandates. And if they say it's 600mm of insulation loft, that's what it is. You can't say, well, it'd be better if you put 1,000 in or something like that. They'll say, well, we're not going to. Any developer's going to do the minimum they can within the law, as you just quite rightly said. So you can just encourage.
Yeah.
I mean, there's now kind of you have to consider now heat pumps and photovoltaics, PVs now, but it's not mandatory. It's considered a plus if you do it.
Yeah, so perhaps, sorry, just to sort of come in to this. So we've got sort of an internal one about, whether if we have heritage proposals, but the external one, maybe it is to have a conversation with planning and highways about what may or may not be possible, because I think what I'm hearing is it's a bit bigger than what we can discuss and decide here tonight.
I think my point
Councillor
was,
Matthews.
because I think I got lost, because I think you're thinking about extensions, I was thinking about larger projects than that.
Yeah.
Because, there's advice and whatever groups to consider, but I'm just thinking, so if we're, in terms of if we've got comments to say on things that have been built, like Jinton Fields or St John's, then we keep in whoever we're writing to, we have a climate action element on that.
So it could, for example, be something like, and it would only ever be a recommendation from us, as things are at the moment, but it could be something like asking for more cycling and walking ways, or car sharing areas, or whatever it happens to be that we might think is important at the time to help us in Seaford reach these goals. It might not have to be done, but at least we're saying it. If you don't say it, it may never happen. So,
I mean, Chair, for you, Chair, I mean, some of the big care home applications, we have looked at those sort of what you're sort of pointing out. Those are sort of aspects, so we do consider that. We know the ones we've had seen in recent years.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, a lot of what we do is what is front of us, isn't it? When we're considering planning applications. Now, if you're trying to increase additional non-statutory elements of every application, which we could, then we'd want to have what we say. So we want to have obviously steerance from the officers here as well, as opposed to just us thinking about it. We'd want a bit more on the planning side from what officers would want us to say, as opposed to in addition to what what we really have to say. If you say, I mean, there's a difference.
So maybe this is something which could be, when it goes to GOSCA, one of the options might be to have a discussion at planning and highways. I was going to say this is, something which Councillor Buchanan was quite passionate about. So maybe rather than debating it here tonight, we just capture it and we take it forward, and then we see, does it have legs, does it not have legs, and then see in which ways it might be practicable. Yeah.
Do we need to try a break?
Would anybody like to have a break?
Wouldn't mind getting it done.
Would you like a break?
Just Councillor Matthews is in the room.
Yeah, okay. Right. I will take 13, just because I think we've actually covered a lot of this already, even though Councillor Matthews is out. So it's talking about collaborating with other local authorities, organisations and partners into consultation. So we already had an opportunity to input, which we did, into the LDC Climate and Nature Strategy refresh, which we did through this committee, for example, so that was a great example of how we can do that. But obviously there might be also really, I think this one's quite self-explanatory, and I think the sentiment that I've had from everyone in the room before is that yes, we want to partnership work as much as possible. Councillor Taylor.
Can we just add in the South Downs National Park?
Yes. And in our partnership, so they're in there, but yes.
Well, yeah, but I think we differentiate the parts involved at the other end of the town.
Yeah, okay, so, yes. Okay, great point, yeah, thank you. Councillor Meek?
Considering this talks really about collaboration, but then it said in consultations which have bearing on the climate resilience of Seaford. Now, climate resilience is a vast topic. I mean, I think something that was raised by one of the open meeting we had the other day for the local plan, which was raised, and I looked into I looked into it before, and I'd actually raised it here before when I was and elsewhere, and I was told it was nothing to do with us really, but that is that we are a very large town which is totally reliant on 3 roads which go through floodplains, and if we get a substantial flood, Exeat will be flooded, the 259 going to Newhaven will be flooded, and so will Alfriston. And there's no way, therefore, but we would be kind of an island in a way. And I think that is something that I was told, this is nothing to do with you, this is dealt with by the big emergency statutory authorities of East Sussex and probably Kent and everything, and they're a kind of emergency, they have a kind of emergency tactics and things. But I do think we need to kind of think about that as a town council, that we might be a little bit, cut off.
Yes.
And I know there are things like helicopters, and there's the sea, come on the sea. But I think it's interesting that we might find ourselves in a particular situation if there was suddenly 3 foot of water every which way you might want to go. I just put it out there as a kind of thought. And then if Morrison's don't get supplies in for 3 days, people are going to go, hang on, I can't get any food. And there was something in the paper the other day about the fact that we as a country are desperately short of food resilience.
Yes,
we are totally dependent on imports. So I think growing capacity in this town, climate resilience, that's climate resilience. If we're able to grow stuff here and keep it here, something we might think. I know that's a very big topic, but I do raise it. Just
I think there's sort of two things that I would.
We've got a farmer.
2 things that I would tease out of that. Yes, there is growing in situ stuff, which I think probably would have sat better in some of the other points. But and then there's the whole the flooding and the being cut off, and the actual fact that we want to be at the table in these discussions. Now there were, and again the names escape me, so I'm sorry. There were some forums and collaborative groups that at least used to exist, whether they still do I don't know, that the council had representatives on, but also isn't there something like the Coastal Resilience Forum or something that Lewis District Council sit on? I think there is something in existence, I can't for the life of me remember what it's called, but perhaps it's something coastal, something like that. To look into and see if perhaps as a town council we need to try and have a seat at those tables. Councillor Halliwell.
I think about 10 years or so ago there was the flood action group in the area. It lays like at the moment, doesn't it? It doesn't really activate between all the partners, but it could again. Councillor Halliwell was quite active on that side of things when she was first on the council. Actually, one at the local plan, it was interesting that someone mentioned the cut mill. Obviously, that's half in Wilton, isn't it? And does that link into other issues to the remainder of it? So, just because you've got a river, is it another authority that can't be in that particular plan? So I never know if that was an interesting situation where local plan with something to do with the rivers, with infrastructure effectively or whatever, or flooding, how can a neighbouring authority, can that go into mention it in passing as such? I don't know, that was something which I was aware of the other evening.
Okay, that's an interesting one, perhaps something that we could take forward into our local plan discussion that's happening.
But I
next
think
week.
there's structure in place, but
Yeah.
it's laid low. It's probably since the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think things come to an end since the pandemic, and then it sort of
Yeah.
hasn't really come up
Yeah.
again. But you may want to revisit that if you feel that that's important, council. Couldn't that sort of thing?
Yeah,
maybe.
okay, so we can capture that as an
Yeah.
idea, perhaps that we need to
Yeah.
start re-investigating that. Okay, thanks very much. Riley?
Kristen.
Yes.
I just want to know, is it the Sussex Resilience Forum?
Could well be.
It's led by the police and it's about emergency planning
Yeah, I
in the
suppose there's,
area.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
it's on
yeah.
the East Sussex
Thanks.
County Council website.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. So, again, we've got, I think we've covered a lot of this, participate in knowledge sharing with other stakeholders, basically keep up to date with methods and so on. So we've already spoken about training and joint training opportunities. Are there any other ideas that anybody else would like to input to this at this point?
I just want to say it's my usual comment on training. Unless you're going to identify outcomes and benefits, going on training for training's sake is pointless. And it's how that's logged, how those benefits are logged and shared with other people that haven't been on the training. And also, how do you then apply that training in the workplace, and what have the staff done about it? So we've invested in training, but how has that resulted in an outcome, an output, a change?
Absolutely.
It's the so what element of the training,
Yeah.
and that's never
Well, I think
mentioned.
maybe that's something we need to try and capture a little bit better, but for example with the climate literacy training that several of us did earlier in the year, that was really about, and it was mostly counsellors, I think officers had intended to come and perhaps will in the future. It was about understanding not just some of the issues, but actually understanding some of the methods about what might be able to be done and how effective those are, and whether they can be applied to the kind of challenges and problems we've got here in Seaford. So absolutely, I think, you know, not training for training's sake, we need to have an aim for that and a way that it translates, whether that's increasing knowledge, applying better skills, being able to actually quantify a problem, whatever that is. But yeah, absolutely, it's time, and quite often there is quite a lot of training that's available now that's third-party funded, which is quite good. But yes, certainly with this, I think one of the things that was identified, certainly with our previous town clerk and previous officers, notwithstanding Sharon, is that there perhaps we didn't have the skills or the understanding within the officer cohort and within the councillor cohort to really properly understand how we could best tackle all of these things. And I think that's an ongoing process, and you know, trainings that are available will only help us to achieve that. And you know, where we can't, it might be a case of looking at external partnering or getting in external expertise. Absolutely. Councillor Matthews.
I think, yeah, moving forward, I think it's important to have that come up with policies and actions that are, what's my train of thought now? Are evidence-based.
Yes.
And yeah, and I think that was important. Of course, council officers need time to research that evidence, but then also, if they're going to get asked questions about it from councillors, then they can go, yeah, I'll put it in this paper or whatever. So
Yeah.
it is really important to kind of keep evidence at the heart of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
In terms
Absolutely.
of what we want to achieve.
And just that sparked a thought within me that we as a council belong to various other organisations. I always get them mixed up, NALC, SALC and whatever the other ones are. And I wonder whether they have anything, they might even just be sort of pointing us towards things, or sort of making that journey a bit easier for us, so that we can take advantage of what others are doing, what's already being done, sort of within that public sector council structure. Okay, great. If nobody has any further comments, I will say that we've finished that item. Thank you for bearing with. It's taken a wee bit of time to get through that one. Would you like to have a little break before we go on to talk about the grass cutting?
Well, we've done,
Don't we have to?
You
don't we
do.
have
Oh,
to
sorry,
vote on
yes,
this?
we do, we absolutely do. I'm so glad that you're
I think
sitting
we want to
next
get this
to me.
done.
To measure
Right.
recommendations.
We
Those are
have to
concepts
know.
of the report.
We do.
Yeah. On that.
Page 8.
Thank
You're
you.
not losing the rules.
Just to
Yes,
note those
that's
contents.
Right, it's much better, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to be a convert soon. Right, councillors. Right, we flick back to page 8, and the recommendations are to note the contents of the report and the comments made by the subcommittee during the meeting. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor DeBass and a seconder, Councillor Meek. All those in favour? Yes, okay, that's unanimous. I won't need to do any others. Thank you very much. Right, would you like to have a break or crack on?
Crack on.
Right, so thank you very much, Sharon, for preparing this report on our urban grass verges, updating us on where we are. We've had not quite a year of having had them, well, I was going to say passed down, but really we opted in to take them off East Sussex County Council, and I know that's been a bit of a learning curve as we've gone. So would you like to speak to this report?
Yeah, I can do. So yeah, we have worked with a contractor to look at just cutting our verges, and then secondary to that, we've started working with the group which you've been part of as well, Councillor Bristow, to look at whether a cut and collect option might be viable, but that isn't at the moment on all verges. That's just on a selection or a piece of verge for us to explore, and just to see whether there was any studies or science going forward to see whether that would work and what we could do as a council to explore that a bit further, really. So is there any questions from any of you about the report going further? And obviously it will be reported back later on next year of how, or later this year, of how things are going with those studies.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sharon. I'll just clarify slightly that we had a working group that had, or sort of informal working group that's come out of this committee with On the Verge, which is now part of Seaford Action for Nature, who've got quite a lot of expertise and access to various expertise in terms of ecologists and contract managers and so on and so forth, and external contacts at organisations like Plant Life, who write the Good Verges Guide, and there was a meeting we had with the head officer of Dorset County Council, who's responsible for their verge cut and collect scheme, although that was highways verges and not urban verges, and we spent quite a bit of time investigating what we might be able to do in terms of cut and collect, given that we had this kind of higher cost but long-term benefit projected. Could we do it everywhere in Seaford? Would we have a trial zone? Would that be largely dictated by the soil type and the fertility of the soil, so on? And you know, we did quite a lot of exploration, and the upshot really was, after speaking to Dorset and some other councils, that the practicality in terms of cutting was going to be such a cost consideration, and how to deal with the cuttings, the arisings, was also going to be such a cost consideration that actually that would probably outweigh, if not certainly balance, where we might do cut and collect in terms of soil type. So initially we sort of felt like the soil type was going to be the driving factor. Was it clay and a more rich soil, or chalky and a poorer soil, and how many seasons was it going to take to sort of get your larger number of cuts down to a smaller number of cuts and less growth and a better environmental and better cost point. But actually it sort of transpires that things like the gradient of the verges that you're cutting, or perhaps the width or the accessibility, or how many obstacles it has in the way of trees or benches or whatever it is that the machinery has to work around, and how and really the cost of dealing with the arisings was going to be so crucial that we sort of parked the more scientific element in favour of officers doing some more investigation on the practicalities. And it's great to hear that perhaps there might be some solutions that are closer to home and may not involve our contractors having to take grass if we were to do cut and collect a long way away. Of course, residents-wise, you know, I think we've had 1 year of part of a season of, we did 4 cuts last year, did we?
We did manage 4 cuts.
Which was great, but the first 2 cuts, obviously the grass had been left longer because we didn't have the contract in place, because we hadn't had the handover and so on and so forth. And you know, as we know as councillors, we've had so many concerns raised by residents about the grass being too long. When it is cut, the grass is everywhere and it's left and it's untidy and it clogs the drains and the seeds get into the dogs and all the other problems. So as well as sort of cost and environmental benefit, there's potentially that benefit of having a tidier street scene if you get to a stage of cut and collect where you're not having to cut so often, you are collecting the arisings. So all the things to consider really. But yes, it's coming back to practicalities really. So sorry, just to from the horse's mouth there. So any more comments or questions? Sorry, Councillor DeBass first, then Councillor Matthews.
So the website's still not updated. You've got one sentence to type into that website to say it will be cut in the months of April, June, August and October. It's still not on there. And it still talks about last year's cut. So can you update the sentence, please, with take out last year's cuts and put this year's cuts in, please.
Right, so we'll have that. I'm sure that's probably on the to-do list, but just to make sure.
I've been asking for months.
We'll go back and check where they are with that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor DeBass. So I'm just coming to Councillor Matthews, and I will come to everybody else.
I just want to commend you both, everyone who's been involved really in gathering all this information, because it's such a local political hot potato that it's difficult to know where to start. You've chipped away at it and you've come up with a lot of information. So more than I would ever thought you would ever get dream of. It's quite a science. So so I think I mean all the information's there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. So
Thanks very much, Councillor Matthews. I should say that, you know, we really benefited from the involvement of people from On the Verge and their contacts as well. And actually going forward, I did mention earlier on in the meeting that the National Park and Eastbourne Borough Council, Lewis District Council staff have some potentially quite pertinent knowledge and suggestions of what we might be able to do. So definitely got further avenues that we can look down, hopefully help as well. Who was next? We had Councillor Meek and then Councillor Honeyman, I think.
So I just wanted to clarify Councillor DeVass's point, but I didn't quite understand what you were saying. Were you saying that it hasn't been published on the council's website? Okay, I understand. What I just want to I think what we need to make sure is that the residents understand what's happening. So Sharon, you did say something about we might do some in some places, but other places or not. Do we mean that this year we're just going to do 4 cuts as it is, and there's going to be no experimentation, and it's all going to be left? The arisings are going to be left?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we need to make that plain.
On the website.
But I mean, but they know that is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you said it will be weather dependent, but if we do get a very wet summer for some reason and the grass grows a lot, will we be in a position to ask the contractor to do extra cuts? Is that something we can? Because I remember when the previous Louise was here, there was an option that we could go to 6 cuts or something, and there would be options to change that regime a bit if we needed to on the ground, which was never possible, it seemed, with the SCC.
If we increase what we've committed to, we would have to pay for that.
Oh, I know.
So it might be something that we could look at exploring with the contractor to see whether they have time in their other schedules, as well as Seaford Town Councils, to work with us to deliver those extra cuts. But obviously if we are experiencing some bad weather and they are unable to cut on certain months that they've committed to, they would cut as close as possible to the dates that they've scheduled for Seaford Town Council.
No, fine. That's great. Sorry, please.
I just wanted to add to that, obviously it would be an unbudgeted spend,
Oh, yeah.
and it's not insignificant cost for the whole town to be cut again.
My understanding is that our current contract with our current contractor goes until 2020, before the 26th season. Is that correct?
So we've only got another,
years.
this is the second year that
Second
we're
year
in.
of 2.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
then
if we
we'd have
did
to
move
look
to some sort of cut and collect, the sweet spot to do that would be for 2026. But we came up with the 4 cuts. Can't even remember which. Must have been in community services. East Sussex were only doing 2. So
Yes.
residents are already getting an extra 2 cuts, and this year they will be better spread out than they were last year. Still working around, I know it's a sort of notional May in terms of no mow May, but broadly speaking around no mow May. Okay, did we have a further comment here, Councillor?
I've got some
Question?
I know the county council use their own contractors, don't they, for the key junctions, which I don't think the public necessarily know that. So I was wondering if we can sort of publicise that element, because they see what the town council's contractor does their bits, and they wonder why some bits have been left as key junctions, and yet they may be following up 2 weeks later. You see what I mean? So I just wondered if that's made clear.
And that all come down to whatever policy it was in there, about inform and promote, isn't it? It's about informing the public about what.
Can I just come back on that?
Or what can the council do?
Yes, because if memory serves me correctly, I remember asking specifically this question to Louise actually when she was in post, and it was my understanding that we had taken on the responsibility to do those junctions, or is that not correct?
No, so whatever
Okay.
junctions are within the urban contract.
Yeah. So will that, if we've got a map, which presumably we do, and I know that map's changed because there were some teething issues in terms of what East Sussex thought it was responsible for. Then we had, obviously with the first year of any handover, there were some areas that weren't even on the map, and the officers have done quite a lot of troubleshooting, which is great. But do we now have, or are we close to having an up-to-date map that we could put on the website so that people would sort of know whose responsibility was where, or do you think that would help?
I think we'd have to look at how clear that map is for people to understand where we have now got to with the work that we've
fair enough.
done.
Yeah.
But it would be more, instead of a visual map, it would be a link,
Right, yes.
because it is too vast to display.
Okay, fair enough.
I've got one follow-up.
Quick, and then I'm going to wrap it up, yeah.
But can an urban version, a highway version be the same thing in some situations, or is it totally separate? The highway version and an urban version, can it be the same?
I thought where it came onto the A259 there was...
Depends what you mean by that. I was trying to work out what you mean by the difference.
Yeah.
I think some of them may merge into
Each other.
Really, that's the
I
easiest
think the
answer
important thing, isn't it, for when residents, if there's a verge that's, for example, that's coming onto the A259, I'm really thinking
That
about
is a
sort of the bigger ones, that they know who to report it to. I mean, I know as a councillor, and I'm sure several others, we got, this is really long, and I expect you got emails here, but it's who to report to and knowing. And it's, so that's going to be a journey, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
But we can do our best with the website. Councillor DeBass.
I was just going to say, if you look at the website, it tells you all that on the website, but if officers can just check the maps straight away.
Well, that's
when
it,
you're
because the map's
updating that,
slightly
it tells you who to
updated.
report it to, it shows you the urban maps, it shows you the links, it's all on there.
The maps, when they were transferred, I know they've slightly changed, but yes, they
Yeah, we
they
just
were.
need to check if they're being updated.
Yeah,
But
okay,
they are
thanks.
there.
Right, have we got any comments or questions on the actual report? Okay, great. So we've got 2 recommendations. To note the contents of the report, and I'll take them together, and to note that further updates or findings from the research into cut and collect methodology will be presented to the newly established Golf, Open Spaces and Climate Action Committee from May 2025. Could I have a proposer for the 2, please? Councillor DeBass and a seconder. Councillor Matthews, and all in favour? Excellent, that's everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, brilliant. Right, that brings us to the end of the agenda and to the end of the Climate Change Subcommittee as we know it. And I'm not going to sing any theme tunes, but I'm going to declare the meeting over at 9:23 p.m. Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks officers for your support.
Thank you.